Welcome to the HIT podcast, H.I.T, Human Resources, Insurance, and Technology. I'm your host, Toby Kennedy. As with every week, we are dropping into your feed on Tuesdays with what I hope are awesome, bite-sized, digestible content catered specifically for you, the human resources professional. This week's episode is brought to you by Montage Insurance Solutions, and we pick up live from the stage. We were the keynote speakers opening the general session from the main stage at the big CAHR conference put on by Pyra. Take a look at our three-part series and enjoy. We're going to transition now to our last part of the conversation. We're going to talk about the future. We're going to gaze into our crystal ball, and we're going to prognosticate together, especially because we've just sat up here for 40 minutes or 2 episodes, if you're looking at this in the past, talking about maybe some of our skills of discernment, right? And we got here by having 20-something years in this industry. Looking forward, and I don't want to spend too terribly much time on it, but I would describe AI as the elephant in the room, right? So where you look at these things, and it's like, it's like I live through people telling me, Beanie Babies are going to be the next, currency, and buy real estate in the metaverse, and you're like, yeah, blah blah, right? But then at the same time, you've got that kind of technology adoption curve. I think Simon Sinek popularized. Actually, I think it was from farming technology, but irrelevant. Where you've got kind of the early adopters. Right now, I think we're in the middle of the parabola, and we're maybe at risk of being the laggards if we don't figure out how AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, all these sorts of technological advancements that have made strides in the last 2 years, and 2 to 5 years from now, God knows where they're going to be. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts, and I'll start with Catherine, on specifically how, on like a daily SOP, the manner in which I do my business, my standard operating procedures, what facets you see AI sort of changing in the next 6 months, 12 months, 3-5 years?
Yeah, so I think it's here to stay, and I actually think it's in my personal opinion, it's a good thing. I think that AI is going to help us our speed of doing things, right? So if you think about the health space and you think about how do I find the right doctor, or how do I find the right care, or what is the type of care I need, AI can actually assist in that, and I think is going to assist in that, so that we can help match the services that we need in a more quick way. And so I think, at least the carriers I'm working with at the moment are already doing that work, and they're already talking about what that next level is going to be, and I think that'll be really helpful, because I still have folks in our organization that go, I don't even know how to use a health plan, to your point. Yeah. I don't know where to go to get a doctor. How do I do this? What kind of doctor do I need? So I think AI at the first level will be really helpful in taking some of that burden off of both the carriers and us.
I totally agree. I've sat through a few presentations, recently. One organization, Garner, comes to mind because they use AI and billions of claims points, right? Because now we're at this weird inflection point where some of the transparency mandates have come down the pike. So providers have to put this stuff forward and in machine readable files. And we finally have the AI to ingest all this data and do something with it, where you can literally pull up an app and it looks like Uber. Yeah. And you can sort of see different providers, what they're charging, how they're doing. And when you back up your initial point of claims care, and I was talking to the guys from Excel Health about this last night, and we just talked about this a minute ago with respect to, does this doctor have a tendency to take us straight to surgery or straight to PT, right? So you back up the initial point of contact, and some tools out there, again, like Garner, I think, so are really interesting ways to use AI and use some future claims mapping.
Absolutely. And I think in the HR space, it's just like all the talk on co-pilots and what that's going to be is super cool. So I think it's super exciting. It does feel like you're a little behind on some level, because I do think these co-pilots.
We're looking to the future now. Don't worry.
They're going to attach to our HCM systems and just really, they're not going to displace jobs. They're going to allow us to upskill jobs, but they're going to allow us to get things done in a more effective and efficient way.
Yeah.
And if done right, like it's all about sort of the tagging and all the rest of it, but it really can be useful in all your policies and helping your folks navigate what they need to do and how they, or it's like, hey, what's my leave of absence? What is my leave of absence numbers or eligibility? What's my policy? How do I get there quicker? And it just helps with that first level. It doesn't replace the HR function, but it does help with that first level inquisitiveness.
Like the inquiries of employees.
That we'll be able to really, I think, streamline in the future. So
I love that. Jen, you want to expound for us?
Yeah, no, I'm also excited, and I love the examples that you've given so far. I just think, from the employee perspective, it's really going to help them too, right? Because most of them, what is a copay? What is a deductible? Yeah. We've explained it a million times, but being able to have a chat box or bot or whatnot to be able to answer those, ask those questions, find the right doctor, see if they're going to take you to PT, whatever that is. And the data aspect of it is going to be great too, because I know a lot of companies, we have data in a lot of different places, and it takes time and energy and someone to bring it all together. And I think AI will help streamline that so we can really start and continue to make better decisions from a strategic standpoint. I think those are two really big areas, but just streamlining a lot of the processes, making sure we're compliant, especially if we're working in different states or countries, because it's a lot to keep track of and things are always changing, and being able to have that information at our fingertips and make decisions quickly will be really wonderful.
Yeah, I agree. I think, look, if you got hold of someone 100 years ago and explained to them what % of farming jobs we have today and what % of farming jobs we're going to have in 2024, they think, my God, everyone's unemployed, sort of a thing, right? Because as things move and shift, there were roles that were done by people, and people move and shift into other roles. And I think we're all kind of acknowledging that some of that may be entry level, what's an HMO, how many days off do I have? A good sophisticated chatbot replaces that function of HR. But I mean, you mentioned it upskills, right? Now it means, we mentioned this, we're all 20-something years in it, they didn't used to have a ton of chief of human resources, right? That wasn't necessarily a title. So as we elevate up the craft, then we're getting, bigger, more strategic seats at the table, which I think is super interesting. We talked a little bit about AI from a claims standpoint, and I want to tease things like Surest, for example, or other benefits tools that use heavy steerage, right? So we'll look and see a doctor and that doctor's performance, right? And what's interesting, even within the same hospital, right? You might have a doctor that performs a colectomy and has an average infection rate afterwards of 5%. Same hospital down the hall, another doctor 50%, right? And if you, the employee, think, well, I'm doing the right thing, I'm going to Cedars or whatever, there's a range even within that same doctor pool. So what's interesting is, as we're now able to analyze physicians and doctor behaviors, we can steer employee. Look, I'm not telling you who to see. You go to church with this guy, you want to see him, that's fine. But your copay for this doctor is $80. Your copay for this doctor is $5, right? So dynamic variable copay plans or vanishing deductibles that say, hey, if you want the same surgery at the hospital setting, that's fine. You can pay your deductible. Or if you want it done in an outpatient facility, no copay, no deductible, right? And I'm interested in your thoughts on those types of innovative healthcare plans. Jen.
Yeah, I'm excited for it because we're all busy. If somebody does have to get a surgery, right? Like if I have to get a surgery, I have to find time to be able to research the doctors and where to go and what to do, and having all of that information easy to access to be able to make those better choices. I think our employees will, and we'll be able to help them do that.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for that.
And you're comfortable rolling that out?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, one of the data points on Surest, so they're 7 years into a pilot, right? And they've got some big names using them now, and they're associated with United Healthcare, not necessarily with us, and it's a great product. 15% savings on average for employers. The premiums are down 15%, and on average, member experience, the employee, is paying 50% less than folks that are on other more traditional PPO plans. So it does become that kind of win-win-win sort of a thing. And when they looked, by the way, at high-performing doctors, 80% of doctors were considered high-performing doctors. 90% of doctors are high to moderate. It's really just those 10% of doctors that are driving sort of unnecessary claims. And if we can steer employees to other providers, we have a better claims experience. We have a better claims year, and that's a win-win for everybody. I'm curious some of your thoughts on this.
No, I mean, I agree. I think it has everything to do with data to drive decisions. It has everything to do with creating as much transparency into the process. Health is complex, right? There's so many moving parts and pieces. And it's I just know with like a global workforce as an example, when something happens and somebody's, out of the country and the process, depending on which country they had an issue in. And so I think anything we can do to destigmatize that and empower it for our for our employees, to give them the tools to really understand what they're buying, what they're doing, I think is really, really helpful, because it's the same on the compensation side, right? Like, let's try to create as much, that's where legislation's going, as much transparency as we can, so folks, you level the playing field, and then you empower folks to really sort of drive what it is that they need in the end. So I'm all for it.
We talked a little bit about creative solutions along the way, and you mentioned a couple of years back you guys transitioned to self-funding. So for folks out there that are listening, that are hearing, hey, some of these new and innovative stuff, I do think it might be time, right? You've gone through a major transition. Talk to me about transitioning a healthcare plan in a major way, how that went, pros and cons, what your sort of learning experience would be.
So it is, ours was maybe even more complex than a normal organization might be, because we were a PEO, right? So we were on we offered 300 different plans with different deductibles and different kind of things. So it's a very different experience. So it was complex. Usually when I've done it in the past, you're going from, 1 or 2 or maybe 3 carriers into your self-funded plan. And again, we still have CAHR, of course.
Yeah.
Did
I hear a woohoo?
Yes. I know, you love CAHR. So it took a lot of time. It took us a year, really, in advance.
The woohoo is a good point. That's a good point. When you go to self-funding, you can self-fund your non-CAHR carrier instead of beside CAHR.
You can have.
If we lost anybody along the way that's a CAHR
If you still want
dyer,
Tufts in the Northeast, you can still do that
there you
too.
Go. Yeah, sorry, keep going.
But I don't think it has to take as long. Normally, I would say it's, let's say 6 months of a process, right? Where you're getting your claims data, you're getting all of the, where your colleagues are, all the demographics, and you're kind of looking at your choices, and you're doing an RFP with various carriers. To understand who your administrator is going to be, and then working through, if you're going to do, which we do, of course, stop loss insurance and all the rest of it. It's not as hard. I think the most fun part for me, anyway, was designing plans. Like, you take your basic construct, and then you say, well, where can I afford to pull the reins and play with things, right? And so that you can create the right kind of coverage and the right kind of attachment points for your colleague base that gives them choice, right? So in creating a PPO plan or a high deductible plan, and then how do you give incentives in your high deductible plan? You just have all the freedom in the world to be able to kind of create what you think your colleagues want, and then do education around it. So it was harder because we're going from a PEO as customer number 1 into this type of plan. But now, getting a better insight into our results specifically, and then being able to reinvest anything that we save back into the plan to give right back to colleagues is kind of an awesome benefit. And and really being able to have more control, really.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned kind of all the freedom in the world, and that it wasn't as hard as you would like to think. Because fundamentally, obviously, insurance is a transfer of risk. Do I want to hold this risk? Or do I want to give it elsewhere? Or what part of the risk do I want to hold? And what's someone else pricing for me to move that risk? And we just look at all the different risks we're holding, which ones we want to shift, which ones we want, which are priced right. What am I buying? What am I selling? What am I holding? And sort of designing in that way. I
would say the hardest part was the emotional piece for colleagues, like attached to oh, I like being part of this, the Blues over here, or Aetna over here, United Healthcare. But once you get over that hump, they're like, wow, especially if you're enriching your plans, which we were, the benefit outweighs the holding on to the past.
Jen, I'll ask you the same sort of question, just to reiterate the question. Major shifts that you've gone through and done, policy shifts, procedural shifts, healthcare shifts that you've had to navigate, and maybe kind of your thoughts on those, tips and tricks?
Yeah, we've been trying to go self-funded for a while, but have not done it yet. The math has not been working out yet. But I think the biggest one was...
Let's talk.
No, I know. Probably rolling out our high deductible health plan with the HSA. We did that. I don't even remember, it's been a long time, but when we did that, it was new for all of our employees, so we really made sure that there was a lot of education around it, employees understood how it worked, and we actually designed it where financially, it's the best plan to choose for employees, whether it's a worst case scenario or a best case scenario, because we really want people to start thinking from that consumer perspective and making choices based on that and helping them navigate how to look at their claim statement and whatnot. So I think any change, you have to have education, you have to have change management things in place, make sure that there's buy-in, and make sure that employees know where to ask questions and get the answers that they need for any type of policy change.
All right, I'm gonna put you both on the spot. Quick 60-second answer from each of you. In one of my episodes, I had a chief of human resources who advocated for HR reporting to the board, not to finance, not to the CEO, but to the board. So, because she's like, hey, I got to manage the CEO too. I'm curious about your guys' current reporting structure, if you're allowed to talk about it, and your thoughts on the ideal reporting structure for a high-level human resource professional, and I'll start with you.
So you mean direct reporting?
Yeah.
So
we're talking about the future here. We're talking about growing the craft.
Yeah. So my knee-jerk reaction is so I have, I guess I would say dual reporting, but I report to the CEO of the organization. CEO of the organization. But I very consistently talk to the chair and the members of the Compensation and Human Capital Management Committee. I do reporting to them, but they're not my boss. But their job is to give input and guide and advise, not to actually direct the leaders of the organization. And so there's a line there.
Jen?
Ours is similar. So HR reports to the CEO, and we do provide reporting and any updates that we need to the board.
Is that what you guys think is ideal? If someone's still reporting to COO or CFO even, so now the initiatives they're trying to launch are bumping into finance, would you recommend looking into a reorg?
I think it depends on the organization and the size and the complexity of the organization, so I don't think one size fits all. I think in our organization, it does create, there's a lot of people strategies, there's a lot of things, in our world, and I've seen some in the marketplace and whatever, but people matter. And so if you want to have a strategy on developing your folks, putting out the right benefits, how are you going to retain them, how are you going to engage them, I think reporting to the CEO makes sense.
Awesome.
Just depends on the size and the complexity.
Catherine, Jen. You guys have had phenomenal careers in human resources. You've shared a ton of wisdom today, and I just personally really want to thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.
That's all the time we have for you this week on the HIT Podcast. Join us next week. Join us every week. Tune in. So we're going to drop these episodes in the future. Follow us. Stop by booth 15. And thank you guys all so very much for your time. That's all the time we have for you this week on the HIT Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us for our 3-part series live from the stage at the big CAHR conference. This week's episode was brought to you by Montage Insurance Solutions and TrueHue. And we thank you guys for joining us this week. Join us this week. Join us next week. Join us every week. And until next week, make this the best week yet.